I'll go ahead and get started. And then as Jana pops in, our third panelist, I will pull her up to the top here. But again, if somebody sees her before me, let me know. Okay, so welcome. This is our second quarterly Social Media for Good forum. Our plan is to do this once a quarter, as long as social media
Lacey,
stops.
sorry, Jana's waiting to be let in. She just texted me.
Okay. I don't see it popping up on mine.
Me neither. Can somebody send her, Amber, can you manage that? Can you send the link over to her from the email and just help manage that?
Yep.
Teresa.
Thank you. So our goal for this entire campaign of Social Media for Good is being willing to take a real look at social media and what it does for us in our life, what it does for society, what it does to positively impact people, what it does to negatively impact people. And what we've found over time is that social media really is, in large part, a reflection of the users, right? We have more power and control over social media than it can have over us. And so our goal is to really take this opportunity to step into the power that we have in social media, be willing to face the bad, be willing to do our part to bring more good. And a couple of people who we have brought to you today have been doing a great job with that already. So let me introduce who we have with us today as our panelists. So first is Gia Goodrich. Gia, say hi.
Hi, everyone.
So we're so happy to have Gia here. We were introduced to Gia by Matt Cole over at Revere Creative here in Vancouver. His wife is on your next podcast episode, I believe.
Yeah, it just aired today.
Okay, I'm excited to watch it. So Gia is amazing. She is a photographer, but beyond that, far beyond that, she has a YouTube channel. If you search YouTube, Gia Goodrich, she's got tons of videos that really are focused on helping you to show up in person, on video, on camera as your authentic self. My favorite quote from our podcast together was you talking about having the audacity to listen to your own voice, to listen to your own inner knowing and show up as the bold bitch that you are, right?
Yes. Which takes work. It's like a lifelong practice, I think, to show up as that bold bitch.
I think so too. So Gia she's got her handle for social media on there, but Gia.Goodrich is her Instagram. And then she's got the Bold Bitch podcast that, how many episodes in are you right now?
We just aired episode 22, I think. Yeah. And they've been like amazing conversations with rebels and rule breakers about all sorts of the awkward, sticky, taboo topics that we don't talk enough about in our culture.
So take a look at that after we've had this conversation with Gia. You will not be disappointed. It's one of my favorite weekly podcasts to listen to. So now let's talk about Joe for a second. So Joseph McNeil, Tatanka Wangila on Instagram, Tatanka_Wangila. Joe is such a light. Adrian and I have been so blessed to be able to have the opportunity to work with Joe on a wind farm called Ampetui. And it's a wind farm being built and fundraised for by the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. So Joe is an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. His dad was one of the, I want to make sure we say it right.
Oh, it's a Greensboro 4.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so he's led a life of activism. In our podcast together, Joe talked about the idea that being a person of color in this country, your life inherently is activism. You just showing up as you are and living is a force of activism. And I would say one of the things that has impacted me the most with you, Joe, is that your main goal for all of the social media that we've been working on with you is to help people feel connected to the earth. Because if people feel this connection to the earth that they have, that they are part of the earth, that the conversations around environmentalism would shift immensely, as opposed to something that we have the power to impact, something realizing more importantly that we are this thing that we are trying to impact. So Joe,
Right.
I'm so happy to have you here. You can follow along on their social media. Again, Tatanka Wanjila on Instagram, and then on Facebook and Instagram, you can look up Sage Power Authority, Sage Development Authority, and find their on Pet to Eat Wind Farm. So
Thank you so much, Lacey. I almost feel like I don't need to say anything. You did such a great job. It's kind of spooky. You pay that much attention. I'm like, oh snap, we're gonna be careful what I say.
yeah, you do.
But yeah, I want to thank everybody for taking the time, to be here for this little bit, period, to listen to, I guess, what we have to say and what we're looking to do to change the world. And it's great to be in a room of folks of like mind, a like heart. It's always fantastic. So yeah, I'm going to end there before I trip over my own words, but I'm very happy to hear what Gia just talked about, because listening to your own voice, being your inner voice, that is that, authentic self that we all have. And whether we can express that or not in the audiences and the circles that we're in is always the challenge. But listening to your soul, like I was talking about what you had mentioned, Lacey, is what we're about here is finding that commonality and connection that connects us to the earth so that we can all take care of one another. So, everything revolving around that. I'm happy to be here.
Beautiful. Okay, did we find out if we could get Jana situated?
Can you hear me? I think
Yes.
I'm on Amber's name. She sent me her link. Sorry about that, you guys. I just went to the Google Meet, but I'll bump out in it after we talk here, and I'm gonna try to get back in so you guys can see my face.
So we can just hear her right now. Oh, I love this.
You can just hear me. Here I am though, but I didn't want to go out and then come back in because I wanted to hear what all the good stuff that was already being said. So
I think I sent you a link too. I sent one to her email. It should be her own link.
I'll jump out in just a second.
Okay, I'll intro you and you can just imagine her glory for a moment. So Jana Dean owns Jana Dean Coaching and Hypnosis, and we at Spry have been so blessed to be able to work with her too, as she comes in and does kind of group therapy for us, basically. As social media managers, and a lot of the people on the call today have some role in marketing, communication, social media. It's tough to have to be on social media, okay? To not exactly have the choice to be there because we're trying to promote either our own brands, our companies, or working for other companies and brands. And so Jana has been able to help us look at how we connect and stay connected to our body while we are spending our time on social media, and be aware and intentional about how, when, and why we are spending time on social media. So she's going to help us kind of look from a personal perspective at how we can improve our own relationship with social media too. Okay, yes. So I'm going to move ahead and start with some of the questions that we have. I want you to notice that in the chat, Adrian is fantastically dropping all the links to the things that I'm mentioning. So thank you, Adrian, for doing that. So as we're talking about stuff, you can follow that along and bookmark any of those links that are interesting to you. So before we can shine light on anything positive, we kind of have to, like I said, take a look in the face at some of the negative. So my first question that I want to pose to the panelists is, what's the worst thing about social media right now? So Gia, I'm going to go to you first. What makes social media suck right now? What's the worst thing?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot. And I think the crux of it, well, two things. One, I think, is comparison, because that is like the death knell for any human trying to show up in a super powerful and authentic way, myself included. So like having the people that have attained the perfection and wondery and the magnetic situation, and then you're like feeling fantastic in your living room, knowing that you just ate macaroni and cheese after you said, I'm going to only eat in a way that supports my body and all the things. So that, I think, is deeply troubling, that it's just always there for you. The other thing is that I think right now we have culturally really gotten lazy. And so we are like creating these factions. Like a great example is the conflict right now with Israel and Palestine, that instead of seeing the nuance and seeing the complexity and really doing our own research and trying to show up in an authentic way, we're very quick to like post supercharged things and not really look at what the depth of the situation is. So I think those two things, the continual fracturing and the comparison, are aspects that we constantly need to be in conversation with. And it's like the easy gravitational force that we can get sucked into if we're not paying attention.
That polarization has been so huge over the last, 18 months or so. I mean, can we raise our hands if you feel like you are on one side of the other or the other all the time, and there's this whole other group of people who think totally differently and live in a different world than you right now? Like,
yes. Well, and I'll just share, like, personally for me, I, as being somebody who comes from marginalized groups of people, I definitely see that, the conflict that's happening right now is like literally fits into the framework of apartheid, right? And yet I just had a walk with one of my best friends who is Jewish and very much feels tethered and connected to the land of Israel. And, and I think one of the things that we need to be able to do is lovingly hold systems accountable, show up with empathy and kindness, and not just demonize folks and perpetuate some of this hate that is really easily accessed in social media.
Lovingly hold systems accountable. Amen. Joe, what about you? What do you think is the worst thing about social media right now?
I really love what Gia just talked about and holding systems accountable, because everything goes back to that. But in holding systems accountable, we need to realize that we're all human beings and we're all on a journey to do better. It's not like we can be best. We can go from worst to best. There's a journey to get there. And that's a better human being, better soul to one another, treating each other better in a better way. We're always learning. And that's the wonderful thing about being in this womb of humanity for our souls, that we're here to develop. And I think that may not be taught to everyone. It's a lot of folks are under the understanding that we're perfect here, that we got it all under control. We got the world in check. And meanwhile, we're tearing the house down and it's on fire. And we're running around with matches, So, but to your question is pointing to that. When you put a message out, people tend to want to come back and be very absolute with you, that, okay, well, you're going in this direction, you're promoting this message, but are you 100% that? And are you a human being? So, a lot of the things with the wind farm is, as Lakota, and I say Lakota, we're categorized as Sioux, Indians. But as Lakota, we're very connected to the land. We're very connected to our relatives, which are all the beings that we live amongst. And that balance is very important to us and always been important to us. It's the spirituality that surrounds us that has been forgotten for the most part in this modern day society. So for a lot of us that have grown up in this world, being colonized, being a modern person, we're disconnected. So that reconnection is a constant effort here for us at home, teaching our children to be connected, living in 2 worlds, sometimes 3 worlds. And so we're on that journey as well, but our goal is to be connected and find and maintain and grow those connections so that our children will learn the same thing, and that we can be connected to our ancestors so that we can hear the messages and pass the messages through, so that we can teach one another and sustain one another. And that's what's important, is that it's all a learning process. So in social media, where I put messages out and relay messages and talk a lot about history, because if we're not paying attention to where we came from and holding account, back to that, Ms. Gia, holding to account what has occurred, folks in the United States shouldn't be nary to throw a pebble at the glass wall that has happened over in Israel. In the meantime, it's important for people to have their own homeland, agreed, but if we're not holding to the account the system that has occurred within not just North America, Middle and South America, but also what happened in Africa, because Europe's wealth was gained from the blood and the plunder of Africa. So there was a lot of going back and taking a look at the history of this modern world that we live in and enjoy all the fruits of, so this thing that we're looking at, these cameras that we're looking at, everything around us, our clothes, our system, our currency, our knowledge, our information base, the speed at which it can communicate goes back 500 years to resource gathering and moving in these systems ahead to where we have this rapid type communication today. So where it was from a bird to a smoke signal, to a boat, to a letter, to a telephone call, to wires, to video chat, all this came along pretty rapidly, but we did not grow along at the same pace of our technology and or our growing of this commerce. So while we've grown materially in one way, we have decreased. There's been a degradation in spirituality in the context that we look at each other with respect, and we, not in the sense, don't capitalize on one another, because there's a lot of history there. My point is, we have to take a long, hard look at what happened and take that into account and be honest with it so that we could see each other today to move forward. And I don't see that in social media. There's a lot of debate even about what's a current fact, depending on what side of the coin you live on.
That's really important. I think we have access to so much more information now, and you'd think that that would allow people to be more informed. But as we've gone on with this, right, it's led to this almost false binary that Alicia was talking about, and being able to ignore that false binary. And what Mark said, as he commented there too, was listening intentionally as opposed to reacting emotionally. And so if we spent our time on social media listening intentionally and not paying attention to this false binary, we could learn and learn and learn instead of just being filtered into these funnels of anger and fighting. So Jana, to you, what's the worst thing about social media right now? No, you're, yeah, now,
I got it. I work with a lot of kids, teenage to early 20 bracket. And so from that perspective, kind of like what Gia was saying, like that pressure, this external pressure to look and be like, what they're seeing. So I see a lot of pressure there coming in. I see for a lot of distraction that goes on where, we're being distracted from life, and that connection, Joseph, like you're talking about, really that true authentic connection that we can have with our families. I mean, we can all be in the same living space, and everybody's on a device, scrolling and disconnected from one another. So those are the areas that I see are the distraction, the pressures to conform to this unrealistic expectation. And to these standards that get set by social media for kids, whether it's on Instagram or body image, or just even one of the big pressures that I see right now are adventure. Like all these kids need to be out adventuring, which is great. Like I like that, I like seeing those things, but it's creating an even heavier pressure on kids that I'm not adventurous enough. I'm not fun enough. I'm not. So even this wonderful thing like nature, getting out and hiking, I'm seeing like and taking these really cool pictures. I'd say I've had like 5 young women, like 18 to 20, come in and talk to me about this, that they're not fun enough, that they're not living a big enough life. And it's all because of the social media. So those are some areas where I could see where we need to improve, 100% need to improve. And I think it starts with cultivating authentic connection to nature, to ourselves first, the going within, and really building tools, just authentic self-love. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was thinking something similar there, Jana, when you said, that it starts inside first. And we talk here about how so much of the problem is comparison. Gia, you brought that up right at the beginning too, comparison as one of the worst things about social media. And when we are faced with a constant reflection, we've got other people to project upon instead of reflecting internally. God, the importance of boredom, the importance of the boredom that we actually have to sit and settle deeply. Instead, we're allowing ourselves, and I say we, and I mean me too, right? Most of us who are here are probably doing this as well. We distract ourselves with what other people are doing and compare and project as opposed to reflecting internally. So I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
Gia?
And just even one more real quick thing, like on those feelings too, a big part of our distraction comes in because we're not wanting to feel the difficult emotions that are inside of us. And everybody does this. It's social media has just taken it all to a whole new level, because it just has. It's accessible, it's quick, it's easy, so yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Jana.
Mm-hmm.
So Gia, if you had to describe what are the causes or the main cause that you're working on giving voice to in your work, in your social media, in the video content you're putting out in your life, what are the causes that you are trying to move forward and give voice to right now that people should be listening to?
Yeah, so I'm going to interpret that in a maybe nonlinear way because I'm neurodivergent and that's kind of the way my brain rolls. So for me, I feel like one of the big underlying foundations of so many things is that we inherently don't feel valuable. We don't feel seen. We don't feel worthy. And so, especially if you come from marginalized identity categories and you've had a lot of trauma that you've been rocking with, and I feel like that is the internal source of a lot of things in our culture. And so for me, the idea for all the content that I'm constantly generating is like really trying to help people understand and recognize the depth and breadth of their fabulous badassery and being able to remove the obstacles so they can really show up fully embodied, fully empowered, and to speak from their gut, from their heart, whatever it is that they want to affect and whatever type of impact they want to have. So to me, I mean, through that, like I am gay, I'm mixed Black, I have ADHD and autism. So there are a lot of specific subgroups within that I can focus on depending on who I'm talking to and definitely sharing my experience. But for me, the core is that you don't need to share those identities in order to have some of these same feelings of like questioning whether or not you should even be making content or showing up. So I'm always about like, how can we just listen to that boldness, show up, and really emanate with your full sparkitality, which is really hard. So
sparkitality, I like that.
Yeah, I just have a habit of making up words. And so actually the producer of our podcast is keeping a running list so that at some point we'll probably have merch or something. And I don't know, maybe like a life goal would be to have sparkitality added to the lexicon. Hashtag.
Pretty sure we're keeping a running list in the comments right now because I put Frumptastic in there and Adrian just put sparkitality.
I love it.
Okay,
let's do this.
I see a connection that I want to kick my computer first and then I'll describe the connection. I see a connection between Gia, you talking about the idea that one of the biggest things you're focused on is people feeling this sense of unworthiness. And Joe, one of the biggest things you focus on is the idea that we have moved in this materialistic way and moved away from this spiritual way where we don't understand our connection to the earth. So of course we feel unworthy. If there's this lie that people are not part of the earth, then we feel disconnected from the power that we come from and that we are. Would you agree with that?
I would say, if you're asking me, is that we're born into a system that tells us to dominate. And if you don't know how to respect those that are around you or learn to have compassion and humility to help one another, how are you dominating something? How are you being number one all the time? And what's the goal of that? To win, 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 win. Whether you're a winner or you're striving to be a winner, being a part of family first, being a part of a relationship with your parents, being taught that, I think. So moving into these spaces where we're examining what a family should I shouldn't say should look like, but what is a nurturing family? We all have that. We all think we have it, and it's a beautiful thing. But we have to take a look at about how we feel about ourselves individually, and if we have these feelings of inferiority or feelings of deep depression, we're not good enough, not worthy enough, then where are these things coming from? So, looking at the roots again, it's going back, right? Going back to examine where you came from so that you can build from that. There are faults in my father was an alcoholic, to a great degree, and he cured that within himself. He also smoked. My mother, has her issues too, and I'm not going to say them because she remembers what I talk about, just like yeah. She's going to come back on me fiercely. No, but the point is, and we own those things that we need to work on. And how do we connect with it and look at each other's eyes, that we have feelings and respect for one another? And it goes back to the simple parable, is treat each other how you want to be treated. That simplicity. It doesn't mean that just because I believe that, then I am a Christian and all Christians are right. But Muslims believe that, Buddhists believe that, everyone believes that, so it's this idea of levels of right, and amongst all the things going wrong is what I believe. Where is that on the scale, of what's dominant and what's right, what's accepted generally versus those that aren't? And that goes into not accepting people who they are in their genuine selves. Much like what Gia was saying, going back to who you are on the inside, which reminded me what Nelson Mandela said, is that we are most afraid of being our own giant inside, of letting that giant stand and be proud of who and where and why we came from. I'm going to stop there.
So here, let me see here. One of the things Adrian said just now is feeling like you have to win all the time is so exhausting. That domination, I think, comes from a place of fear. Surprisingly, you think it shows up looking kind of like power, but it is really from a place of fear when we try to dominate and take more than we need, especially if it's from others, right? And one of the things Mark said as a response there too was that we often tend to dehumanize people who aren't in the room, giving us this false sense of bravery. So Joe, when you talk about looking people in the eyes, even if their eyes aren't here because we're on a screen, can we not humanize the people who we are communicating with? And what a difference that would make. So Joe, I want to give you a chance to answer this question though too. What is some of the main causes that you in your life, in your work, are trying to bring voice to? What are the things that you are trying to move forward to help people know and understand?
What the whole wind farm thing is about here at Standing Rock, and what Standing Rock has been about, is standing up for our children's right and this world's right to exist in the way in which it has before this modern day dominated it and put it in, and commoditized it and begin to sell it, and every little piece of it is worth something of value. That's a false narrative. We come from a place, and well, let me go back. I'm happy for the world we live in. There's a lot of things that we do and how we communicate, see each other, be with one another in these spaces and places where I think the world itself will become one people eventually, and come into a place where we live with the rest of the creatures of the world in balance. But that's been the goal of Lakota people all along, and how we live. Were we perfect? No. Did we fight? Hell yeah, we fought. We were one of the last nations to succumb, to the domination of, the European settlers that came here. But what we did do is accepted people from other places once they shown their respect to us as our own. If there was another person who came to the tribe from another tribe, another nation that came to the tribe and was married into, that person became us. And even other people of other ethnicities became us. So we looked at that in a way that was very holistically, and everyone became us. We were allies, not that we're like the Borg or something like that, but there's that level of respect for people and the world that we live in, and we don't take over. So what we're working on here with the wind farm is building the revenue base. We have to use the systems that are here, commercially, to get ourselves into a place where we can really express our culture in a modern way. So I have part of the solution. I think, I'm very humbled to be able to work on part of this solution, and others will pick it up and move forward in a cultural way that has real cultural roots for us. And as long as we're doing it in that way, where it's not I, but we, then things will grow. If it becomes I, it's done. Because we've had enough of that. It's put us into this place where we're fighting to survive against everything else that's breathing, dang near. And we're not going to be able to go anywhere. So having that recognition that the resources are becoming vastly scarce, and why are the reasons for that? It's that commoditization and profiteering that not everyone is benefiting from. So, as Lakota, being community is number one. So for me, and everything that we're doing here is being and creating community and connection, so that we can share that and just help people to think. One of the goals we have for our website is so that people get to that spiritual connection to the earth. Like you said, Lacey, it's getting out there, and because we all have this connection to this place before we go back to the stars.
Joe, I feel like our group, Spry, as we've gotten to work with you, that you've kind of brought us in that same way that you talked about just now about the Lakota people. When you show respect, you get brought in as one of us. And like the Borg, I do think resistance was futile. It would have happened either way, so let me move to Jana for a minute. So Jana, if you have so many different clients that you work with, and your focus is really around mental health, but if you could describe the cause that you think in your life and your work you're trying to give voice to and make progress towards, how would you describe what your focus is, what causes you're trying to move forward?
Well, the main, when we go back to the root of everything, is our enoughness. I think Gia had touched on that too, is knowing that we're enough, because that's what I see as the root cause of all of our difficulties that come up in life. So one way I do that is through really teaching about, I touched on this a minute ago, about the emotions though, and getting curious about our emotions as opposed to avoiding them and not wanting to feel those difficult emotions. So once people get hold of that, our emotions are just trying to communicate that there's something going on here, pay attention, and how they can really be a guidance system, like this compass that's guiding us all the time. But we come in so harshly and judge those difficult emotions. I know that I did in my life, because I always tried to be positive, positive, positive. And then when I think there's something out there called toxic positivity now, but I think that there's those pieces of us that that was just a way for me not to have to really deal with those hard things. I don't really want to be angry, because anger is bad. But in actuality, anger is beautiful. It teaches us that there's a boundary that needs to be set, that something feels unfair. There's this need to protect. So, when those pieces start coming in, it's like this map, and you have this key, okay, I feel anger here. This is what's going on. So I'm very passionate about sharing this information with people so they can become empowered that they're all good. They're just an emotion, but we judge them so harshly. And I think it's through the fear, like what you guys were talking about, that fear of needing to win and needing to be in control. When we can begin to look at how everything's just about learning and growing all the time, that there's no failure. How can we tweak this next time to do it a little bit different way, whether that's a comment on Facebook, a reaction, a strong reaction that we had to something that we read and then got on, it's how can I have done that differently? Because it didn't really feel good in my body. Anger came up. What could I have learned from that anger to where I would do it next time differently? So I'm really about self-love, self-compassion, self-growth. And I think once we do that, then it emanates out into the rest of the world. But I think it's working on our stuff first, and really getting in check with it. Yeah.
Perfect. So I have a question for each individual now, and I'm going to go in backwards order this time because I know Jana has a client that she's got to work with at the top of the hour. So I'm going to start with Jana and then move to Joe and then Gia. And then if there's space for it and you all have any questions that you want to start putting in here, you're welcome to put them into the chat as well. So let me start with Jana. What I want to ask for you is all of us who are on here are tethered to social media in some way. So how can we have a better relationship with social media? What's one thing we can do or really focus on to try to improve the relationship that we all have to social media?
Yeah. And I think initially it's kind of examining it. Like, where is it now? And where do you want it to be? So kind of putting it under a microscope a little bit. And like, I mean, I know with your jobs, you have to be on a certain amount of hours, but really getting real about it. How are you starting your day with social media, or you're ending your day, and how's it making you feel in your body? You're starting out with some heavier stuff and then that kicks off your day. So kind of going into those questions, and then what are you reading? Like, what kind of content are you allowing in? So, and what kind of energy is that bringing to you throughout the day? So having this self-awareness of what am I taking in and how it's making me feel, I think is key. You got to kind of like examine it and see where it is now and where it is that you want to go. And then the second thing would be creating some boundaries for yourself. Like, I'm all about the hide button. I think we talked about this before, but I'll just go in and hide. So like I love my newsfeed. And if I don't, then I just hide. If I don't, or I take in the information and then I get to decide. I get to be in control, and you guys all have that power, to be able to do that. So, and then creating these online communities that align with your value system, and what is it that you are wanting to receive in this information. And then I think the third thing is, how are you showing up with your online presence? Is it giving to what it is in your value system? So if it's about compassion and respect and connection to the earth, how, like, asking yourself those questions, like what am I showing up in alignment with what my value system is? And then I think that can be a really powerful one, because I think there's a lot of opportunity with social media for good. Once we begin to create that in our minds and set those intentions that this is how I'm going to show up. It was great. I had a kind of view it like a relationship with anybody else. Like, I had a client recently tell me she's a massage therapist. She's awesome. And she had this client that started messaging her constantly, and their value systems couldn't be more opposite. But she said because she was a client, she felt like she just needed to listen during the massage, but then started messaging her. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of like social media. We get bombarded because we just are there and kind of taking it in, and thinking we're passive in it, but we're really not. You can set those boundaries for yourself. So she stopped messaging her back, but she was dominating her day, as opposed to just like setting that boundary that says, yeah, this isn't where I'm going to spend my energy or my time. So I think examining and deciding where we want to put our time is key.
So much good dialogue over here in the chat section. Adrienne talking about protecting her inputs when she feels most vulnerable, right? If she's feeling soft and sensitive that day, protecting her inputs, not taking in as much content. Alicia talking about how they decided as a group with their company that Twitter was kind of a dumpster fire, and they just decided they were going to avoid it entirely. And then Deborah, my mom, hi mom, I love you. She just said, why is it so popular to have somebody be the angry voice on people's posts? Somebody to show up as the angry voice. It's like a popular role to play right now in social media. So that's really interesting.
Well, and I think, just really quick for Deborah, like, I think that what I've seen is, because we're not really processing our emotions, that is a way that people are doing it. It's like, I got to get this anger out right here and right now, so, but because it's all getting shoved down in there, that's becoming this space, as opposed to like getting quiet and still and going within and asking yourself those questions. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jana. Okay. Let's get Joe over here too. So Joe, I know sometimes you have response before I ask a question. So do you have response before I ask a question?
I could listen to Jana for the next 3-4 hours.
Right? Isn't she amazing?
I mean, in particular, the things that she was talking about that struck me was emotions, because our body reacts to things that are bad in the form of pain, and it causes us to move away and to take care of itself. And that analogy of emotions protecting your spirit, protecting your soul, I think, or your psyche, are important to express and let out. And I would teach that to my kids and all my nieces and nephews. I said, it's important to have, when you have sick thoughts, go through it. Okay, all right, I had that thought, why did I have it? Okay, let it go, and don't own it as it's a part of you that makes you sick or malignant, but you had to go through it, get it out, and make it happen. So when you're angry or sad or happy, in particular, just own those and let them, and discover the reasons why. That was so important to me. That's really struck me as revelatory, particularly, I think, from my life. Because the other things too is that, it goes back to being a person of color, in a white dominated society, around the world, well, at least in Europe, here, is that you see the injustice, you grow up with the injustice, you live with the injustice, you live with the threat, the danger, the real physical harm that can come to you. And I wonder why I'm fearful, because I am, and I have to take a look at that. Am I afraid? And when I have dreams, I wake up and go, why am I afraid in that dream? Because I'm looking back at my own history and how I grew up, and being afraid of not just whites, but being afraid of blacks, So I grew up in an all black neighborhood, and I was the lightest kid in the block, So yeah, I was fearful because I got jumped, and on the flip side of things, when I'm in North Dakota here and I'm in all white spaces, am I afraid? I am horrified. I am terrified, at times, depending on the situation, if I'm going to get out of there or not. And is it real? Do I know the people in the room? No, but it's how I grew up in these places and spaces that these things have happened to my relatives, and experiences have happened to me that tell me to watch out, so it's something, it's real. So thank you so much. For the last, what I was just learning, and particularly from this whole experience with you guys, it's been great.
I muted myself to get my cough out and never came back. So the question I want to ask you specifically, Joe, is there's been a long time in this modern American history where people who are inhabiting this land don't understand anything about the real history of Indigenous people and the current living history of real Indigenous people on this continent. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what has social media done to bring awareness to the Indigenous initiatives in today's world?
I think another thing too, just to bounce off of what was just said previously, is that, people will be angry because they're talking about their emotions, and social media gives them a platform to say that in a place of authority, or a place of, what's the word? Of relevance. I have a voice here, I can say it, and I'm going to say it like this. I say that because for Indigenous communities to give our own voices to these issues that are happening to us, not just as Indigenous people, but minority people, anyone, that is experiencing something, it gives you your authentic voice to put your own message out. It's not putting out through a filter of a news station who's going to want to appeal to a certain audience so that, they can drive ad revenue. But it's strictly your own voice to your own issue, your own cause, and you can directly have that conversation. So this is what's happening to me. This is what's happened to us collectively. And these are the facts of that situation. This is our pain. This is my father, my grandfather, everyone's pain that has come up, through these years. And it lends to that. I shouldn't say it lends to that authenticity. It gives real authenticity to issues, because I've grown up, I grew up in New York, and you think that you're so diverse, because you see everything, you experience everything every day, but you grow up in a community that's almost one race, and then the next town over is almost another race and another race. So while you see diversity, do you experience it and live it in a way that you understand? Partially, yes, but in a larger sense, no. So it's, again, that inner exploration where you're looking at other people's humanity. So getting back to the point, I really take off. Getting back to social media gives people the opportunity to say what's really on their mind until Facebook says you can't. It's happened to us. So.
I think it's been such an amazing learning experience for us as we started working with you. You gave us some books to read right away so that we could get a good understanding of, or a good understanding. I mean, it would take decades to research enough to get a real good understanding, but to at least learn foundationally parts of history that have been left out of most education. And social media has given the opportunity for so many Indigenous voices to do exactly what you said and speak authentically from their experience and from their lineage and their family stories to have the facts of what has actually occurred and is occurring. And Adrian mentioned in the chat, Indigenous TikTok. On TikTok, there is a huge movement of Indigenous creators creating content, and I've learned so much through TikTok, through Instagram, by following Indigenous creators. And it's been amazing just to tap into a culture that's all around me that I didn't even know was there. So I'm really grateful for social media and moving those Indigenous voices forward too.
And that was a part of the whole thing right now that's very important, is that we are being seen. Not just, oh, did you hear that this is there? No, but we're being seen on a lot of different platforms and our own voices, that we're not invisible. Because what this country and Western society has done successfully is make it disappear all the bad that was done, whether that's through religion, commerce, colonization, modernization. It's all these beautiful things. And it is, we live in a great world. But all of the harm that it caused people around the world, goes back to where did civilization, modern civilization, come from? There's so much to be explored in this whole looking backwards so that we can understand where we're going forwards. It's not about blame. It should not be about blame. It should be about taking a look at the truth and the facts that we can say, great, it happened. Not great that it happened, but it happened. Okay, now how do we make better systems moving forward to recognize one another and give credence to the pain that people feel and why we're in a place? I shouldn't feel fearful, unless a bear is coming at me. I shouldn't feel fearful of a man or a woman and what their opinion might say. And if they can call the police and something can happen to me, I have to go through a certain set of circumstances that another person doesn't. So it's looking at each other like that. Goes back to Palestine. That's why we relate so well to Palestine. Exactly what's happening to them in real time, real effort, real pain, visually, has happened to us, and it's happened to everyone of color in this country.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, Gia, I'm going to move you in here for a second, and I want to know, before I ask a question, if you have any response to kind of what we've been hearing before I move on to a question for you.
Yeah, well, I love what people are highlighting, especially around TikTok. I think there's so much power in searching the hashtags. Indigenous TikTok is fucking phenomenal. And in fact, we're working on getting Modern Warrior, who's a TikTok star, who's Danae, who's just like making the most amazing content but there's also neurodivergent talk. There's also, any type of like subgroup that you can think of that you kind of have a ping in your gut that you should know more about, and you're a little embarrassed you don't know enough about it. You can search the hashtag and tell the algorithm that's what you want to see, and then just be delightfully overwhelmed by the content that comes your way. And to my mind, that's really how we change. And to Joe's point, like that's how we reattune our nervous systems, right? Is like the first few times something is scary. And the more you can just make it comfortable for yourself, the more you can engage in a way that feels safe for you, the better ally you can be, no matter what group it is that you're wanting to connect with.
I know I've personally, and I think probably a lot of us on the call, as many of us are white, have spent the last 18 months or so waking up to reality a bit, and tapping into social media to learn about the things that we likely should have known before. I had a great conversation with on the podcast this week with Delina Meyer, who talked about the idea of shameless change. A lot of people shy away from change and learning because when we have to do that, we have to admit that we've been doing something wrong for a while. Mm-hmm. And so what I think social media allows for a lot of us to do is have these opportunities for shameless change, where we can plug into something, just like you said, where we're a little shy because we probably should have known more about this. But we can plug in and start learning. And even like we said at the very beginning, listening intentionally as opposed to reacting emotionally. Right. So.
Yeah. And to your point, Sonia Renee Taylor is somebody we just recently had on the podcast. And if you don't know exactly who this human is, she's fucking transformational. And she has a book on radical self-love. And she's in this space where she's really helping people navigate these really tough conversations about accountability and love. And she is really helps guide you through all these really tough conversations, especially around race. She's a Black woman and talking about how we can really wade through all of these waters as allies, as people of those communities, and really show up for each other. But yeah, we've gone into a very well-deserving kind of suboptimal energetic space because that is a big part of social media. And simultaneous to that, it is so exciting, so liberating, it has such a huge potential to create a powerful platform where you can connect with individuals and really show up in your full capacity, your full authenticity. And I can't remember exactly who it was. Maybe it was Mary who was asking, would the world be better without it? And I think the truth of it is that social media is, somebody else said this, social media is neutral, provided that you understand who is pulling the strings in the algorithm. If you don't do that, you will get carried away and swept into these wormholes that are really about manipulating you. But if you really understand, okay, I need to be the architect of my experience, and I really need to feed the algorithm with what it is I want to see, and I need to put content out that I want to exist in the world, then it is this super powerful, wonderful tool that is giving us access to other humans in a scale that we've never, ever experienced before.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. It's so true. It's almost, I was trying to come up with a good analogy. If somebody said, if social media is the hammer, and that's true, but then there also is little hidden surprises inside the hammer that the developers of the hammer created that make it pull in one direction or another. And so we do have to understand how it works in order to use it properly and wield it as well. I want to close with Gia, you talking about really a lot of us are creating content online for businesses, for organizations, or for ourselves at least as well. How do we do a better job showing up authentically in our content for ourselves, for our brands, in a way that allows us to use social media for good?
Yeah, actually, let me just show you something, because I just finished a talk called How to Be a Big Deal, where I talk about this very thing. And I'm finding it right now. Okay. So my kind of case study with being authentic was happened really quickly in this one video, where I just happened to say, I was about nothing related to anything. And I just happened to say, I'm standing in a sea of mess. And then it was this moment that I was like, should I show it? Should I not? Okay, I'm going to show it. And because of that, I had all of these people reach out to me specifically about how validated and seen they felt and how much more connected to me that they felt because I showed that. So for me, the framework that I teach people in this is that it's a fine dance, right? Between Ice Queen and Hot Mess Express when it comes to vulnerability, which is having no relatability and no authority, because a lot of us are trying to show up in a way where we are trying to be authentic, but we're also trying to promote something, trying to be an ambassador for some element. And so really it's making sure that you're not falling into the professional trap of how would a successful photographer show up in my case, and trying to like play into that role. Instead of doing that, really showing up as you, but then thinking about, and I call it strategic vulnerability, which like, I don't know how optimal that term is, but it's really thinking about how does me being vulnerable in this instance serve my community? And if it's something that would really serve them, I do it. And if it's something that like isn't really relevant or might undercut my authority, I maybe won't show it, because it's not about me needing to like bleed all of my uniqueness over everyone. It's how can I create content that's helpful, that's inspiring, that's making somebody feel seen in a way that's important. So one example that I had is a friend of mine who's an Olympian. And just in this grid, you get it, right? Like you get that she's a badass, that she's on the team, but that she's a human and she loves people and she has emotions. And so really figuring out I have like all sorts of frameworks and I teach things around this, but really I think it can be distilled to figuring out how to identify like what your unique thing is, which I call your cultural constellation, which is a combination of your experiences, your values, and your identity. And really just doubling down on you. Like I've said, I'm a gay, mixed Black, ADHD having content creator. And I don't want to separate my identities and my values from who I am. And in fact, the moment I really started infusing my content with all the weirdo complexity that I house, that's when I really started to become a magnet instead of just being vanilla. Which nothing against vanilla, but like if you've been to Salt and Straw and you've like had cornbread, sage stuffing, whatever, you know that like that's the jam. I mean, actually that's not my flavor, but you know what I mean? Like if you are really doubling down and like showing up full flavorific, then you are going to create people who know they can only come to you for that thing. Whereas everybody else is trying to be everything to everybody.
Anybody else feel like we just need to like put our hand on our heart for a second and like just like maybe a tear or two?
A little bit. I feel like we just went to the Church of Gia and
well, that is the thing. Just know the humans in my life actively have to tell me to step off of my soapbox in moments, because I'm just like so passionate about what I'm passionate about that it's hard for me to like take it down a notch. So I appreciate you all hanging out in church with me for a minute.
Yeah, heck yeah. It's a good place to get up on that soapbox right here.
Well, of course, thank you so much, Gia, Joe, and Jana, or how we have come to call them Gia, Joanna.
Gianna.
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 Thank you for spending an hour of your time with us here. Your time is precious, and I'm grateful for everybody who's on the call, just taking part and listening and trying to put their energy towards moving this platform of social media that we have access to, and being showing up authentically, trying to connect stronger with the earth and learn about the reality of what is all around us, and really being aware of our emotions and why and how and when we are going to be using social media. So thank you all so much. We adore you. We'll do another one of these in a quarter, and there are podcasts on the Surprise Space podcast with each of these panelists if you're interested in seeing those. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Go have a snack. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you
so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a good day.